The arena orbiting Ceralax V was not designed for subtlety. It was, to put it politely, an eyesore of monolithic proportion, floating in space like a jeweled ulcer, flashing with far too many banners and pulsating advertisements in languages that didn't so much communicate as threaten to cause seizures. Thousands of species filled the viewing tiers, many of them squelching, shimmering, or humming with anticipation, packed into zero-grav lounges and dome-clustered booths. Somewhere deep beneath the spectacle, the Event Coordination Bureau patted itself smugly on the back for finally orchestrating a non-lethal weapons showcase between the advanced civilizations of the Galactic Accord. Naturally, they invited Earth. Because Earth, the Council had decided, was adorable. Council consensus held that humans were earnest if violent primates, recently graduated to spaceflight and stubbornly addicted to physical projectiles. The word ballistics was often said with affectionate derision, like speaking of a child's crayon drawings or a dog that had learned to balance on two legs. That afternoon's event was called Precision Sovereignty Engagement, which translated roughly as snipers and their strange toys. It was the final demonstration in a series of interspecies combat exhibitions intended to showcase strategic deterrence tactics. Of course, what the Council really meant was, let's let our champions show off and laugh at how humans try to keep up. Up in the Grand Assembly viewing platform, 12 species watched from diplomatic recliners suspended in slow orbit above the match zone. Their ambassadorial expressions ranged from polite interest to open boredom. Someone was already placing bets. Another passed a tub of steaming green moss from tentacle to claw. Why do they still use combustion-based weaponry? The ZYRTH delegate asked, swirling his cup of digestible plasma. Such a dreadful bang. Primitive. Tradition, perhaps, sniffed the Naraxi representative, whose third eye glowed with quiet superiority. Earth's entire military doctrine is based on emotional overcompensation. Or unresolved ancestral trauma, suggested a feathered member of the Morix cluster, who specialized in military psychology. They believe things that explode loudly must therefore be effective. The Council chuckled. A shared, multiversal snort. Down below, a mechanical blossom of steel petals unfolded, revealing the arena floor, an artificially constructed expanse designed to simulate multiple biomes at once. Wind-swept ridges, dense synthetic foliage, a dried riverbed twisting through jagged ruins, and a few suspiciously elevated plateaus meant, perhaps, for those whose combat strategy involved height, patience, and unpleasant surprise. The announcer, six-eyed and bioluminescent, wearing a suit that shifted colors with each syllable, boomed into the multilingual atmosphere with all the gravitas of a deity hosting a talent show. Spectators of sovereignty, witness today's pinnacle event. The grand precision duel between the glorious Council's reigning champion, Tharknox the fractal treader of Chrysian thought space, and, from a little blue planet on the outer rim, representing Earth's Terran Defense Forces, the announcer squinted. Mira Hart. Human. Unranked. A polite pause. Somewhere, a few coughs. Someone chirped in disbelief. The camera shifted. There she was. A single human. Wrapped in synthetic camo netting, crouched low beside a knotted tree, motionless. The transmission zoomed in. She had no glowing armor, no exoframe, no psychically enhanced weapon system. Just a matte black rifle, long and unassuming, its barrel kissed with frost. Her helmet was scratched. Her face unreadable. Is she sleeping? A commentator asked. She appears asleep. She is breathing in intervals of 4 seconds, corrected an observer. Slower than baseline. Possibly meditating. Insects meditate, the ZYRTH ambassador muttered. Humans fidget. While the arena throbbed with overdesigned pageantry, Mira did not move. She hadn't moved in 27 minutes. Council feeds tried to compensate by cutting back to Tharknox, who shimmered into view atop a cliff like a walking religious hallucination. His body rippled with fractal scales. He shifted between dimensions like a man switching hats. Where he stepped, the terrain shuddered. Tharknox raised both arms, each trailing wisps of dimensional residue, and shrieked in 6 voices, "Let the test commence!" The arena roared. Colored lights exploded. A fanfare blared in triple time. Mira blinked. Back in the assembly loft. More laughter. That's it? She brought a stick. the Noraxi delegate asked. It's a rifle, Lex Sloan said quietly. Lex was Earth's representative to the Council, a former Navy intelligence commander who had long ago learned to feign patience and sip Council standard tea like it didn't taste like reheated engine coolant. The others turned to him with bemusement. Do explain, said the Murix diplomat, its tendrils waving dismissively. You Terrans always have a myth attached to your sticks. It's called the M98X Variable Mass Rifle, Lex replied, setting down his cup. Shoots metal. No plasma. No autolock. No AI. Just old-school powder kinetics. Manual. The Zuartich wheezed, delighted. How quaint. No drones. Another pressed. Lex grinned. Nope. So, she must calculate all trajectories herself? Asked the ambassador. Yes. Even with environmental distortion fields? Yes. They paused. The Noraxi snorted. Well, that'll be short. I give her 12 seconds. Lex leaned back. She only needs one. The timer began. 30 minutes of allowed movement. Each sniper had free rein to reposition within their territory. Victory came by confirmed elimination or surrender. Tharknox zipped from ridge to ridge, casting dimensional phantoms to lure attention. His heat signature danced erratically. Every 6 seconds, he disappeared into fractal flickers and reappeared somewhere absurdly theatrical. A spire's edge, a mirrored canyon, a giant metal fong. Mira shifted once. Just once. She adjusted her cheek weld by 3 millimeters. Council commentators grew bored. This isn't warfare, one complained. This is nap time. But Mira had no intention of playing to their spectacle. She listened. Not for sound, there was no sound in vacuum-dampened arenas, but for pattern. She tracked pulse shadows, motion echoes, soft ripples in the artificial wind. Her rifle sight wasn't digital. It was glass. Precision cut, 0 to her eye, not some AI's guess. She breathed in 4s, then 8s. She waited, and then, a glimmer, flicker, upper ridge. He was there. She fired. Nothing fancy. No flourish. Just a single shot. Straight through shimmer, scale, and ego. The arena froze. A long pause. Then the announcer, voice strained, stammered, Tharknox has been hit. Not vaporized. Not injured. Eliminated. A single round lodged in the base of his occipital crest, precisely where his energy field destabilized during phase jumps. Mira had waited for it. Not predicted. Known. She began dismantling her rifle. Up in the council chamber, jaws dropped. Eye stalks widened. Lex sipped his tea. She's done already? Asked the fungal ambassador, voice hushed. She was done before the match started, Lex said. You just hadn't noticed yet. The camera cut back to the arena. Mira stood now, silent, face neutral, rifle slung across her back. She glanced at the crowd, millions of beings frozen in disbelief. She didn't wave, didn't smile. She just turned and walked away. The tree wasn't real, but it had all the right lies. Bark with simulated insect scars, leaves that moved slightly against the artificial wind, and branches just strong enough to hold a human without broadcasting her weight. Mira Hart had chosen it not for its height or vantage, but because it sat between two zones with conflicting gravimetric overlays, which made scanning unreliable and foot traffic erratic. It was the sniper's equivalent of fog, a place where certainty came apart in layers. She didn't move. Not out of stubbornness or fear, but because movement invited noise, and noise led to notice. And if someone noticed Mira, it meant she hadn't planned far enough ahead. That hadn't happened in 12 years. She lay cradled in the high bough, nestled into the curve of the trunk like it had been grown for her spine. Her rifle, matte black, worn at the grip, silent as a held breath, rested across her lap. Its name was Sable. Not because Mira was sentimental, but because naming it helped the newer recruits remember that it was more than metal. It was method. Mira watched. She always watched first. The terrain below flickered through its randomized cycles, ruin shifting subtly under the dome's holomorphic shading, distant ridges contracting as the environment adjusted. Every 7 minutes, the wind direction reversed. Every 12, the light source rotated 2 degrees. The arena liked to test its participants. She liked that. Back at Fort Reach, they used to call her the Quiet Loop. She'd passed sniper cert by repeating the same 6-mile stalk across desert terrain with 0 variance in her heart rate. The instructor had said, half in awe, half in horror, "You move like the planet doesn't know you're here." Mira hadn't answered. She rarely did. Words, in her opinion, were ammunition. You didn't spend them unless the outcome mattered. Her heads-up display showed minimal data. She'd disabled most of the overlays. They were distractions. Her breathing was audible only in the softest compression of sound in her chest. She counted the heartbeats. Not out of ritual, but as a metronome. The body gave away everything. Keep it still, and nothing got out. Tharknox was already moving. Not just moving, showboating. The crystalline shimmer of his body flickered between 4 locations in less than a minute. Mira tracked them all. He left residue in his phase shifts. Nothing dramatic, just a brief thermal bloom, a spike in atmospheric static, a pulse of psionic radiation most beings couldn't feel. Mira felt it. Not in the way a telepath might, but in her skin, like a low-grade hum crawling under her uniform. To her, it was a beacon. She shifted her scope, angled it to catch the refractions. Sable's optic wasn't smart. It didn't calculate. It didn't learn. It obeyed. Mira exhaled once, slowly, and catalogued the arena's sounds, none of which were truly sounds at all. A creak from the false bark. A hiss from a nearby geothermal vent, concealed under ruined fragments. The slight ticking from a council sensor orb trying, and failing, to locate her. She whispered into her mic, not for command, but for herself. Wind southeast. Cycle shift in 20 seconds. Target radiating at 11.7. Pause. Amateur. That was the most she'd said in hours. In the command room far above the dome, someone finally spotted her thermal silhouette, a vague shape clinging to foliage. The image spread across consoles, caused murmurs. There. That must be her. She hasn't moved. Is she conserving energy? She's waiting, said a quieter voice. Lex Sloan, who stood back from the main table with his arms crossed and a look like he'd seen this before. Waiting for what? For him to get bored. Sure enough, Tharknox's movements became less erratic. His flickers stretched longer. His leaps more predictable. To the audience, it was still spectacle, light and movement and arrogance on full display. But to Mira, it was a clock running out of cleverness. He hadn't located her, which meant he'd already failed. He just didn't know it yet. She waited. 12 minutes in, she saw her opportunity. It wasn't obvious. No blinking sign or dramatic flaw. Just a change in rhythm. Tharknox landed for just a fraction too long on a sloped ridge. His feet adjusted. A readjustment. The kind you don't make unless you're uncertain of your footing. Myra's finger slid to the trigger guard. She didn't squeeze it. Not yet. Because this wasn't about one shot. This was about the moment before the shot. The psychological apex of knowing that your enemy is alive only because you are generous with your time. The crosshairs aligned with empty space. She didn't track his body. She tracked the delay. His last shift had been 4 seconds long. His average rest time was 2.1. His vector indicated a zigzag escape pattern, a defensive maneuver. That gave her a 0.7 margin of error. She aimed not where he was, not even where he would be, but where he would land, one frame before he rematerialized. She exhaled, then fired. The round split air with a muffled snap and crossed the arena in less than half a second. It hit nothing, and yet something sparked. A ripple, a shimmer breaking. Somewhere in the Council's live feed, the quantum overlay glitched, and in the command room, a voice whispered, "She missed." Lex shook his head. "Watch." The ridge where Tharknox had just reappeared sagged. Something heavy hit the ground, splayed. The body slid 3 feet before coming to rest in a pile of fractal shimmer and collapsing pride. Mira lowered the rifle. She did not smile. She only muttered, "I warned them." High above, in a private booth lined with soft gold and sapphire screens, a merchant baron from the Tlaxan arm let out a shriek. "Impossible! He can phase through dimensions." "And bullets," Lex replied quietly, "don't care." Mira stood, checked her surroundings. No counter-snipers. No retaliation. Just the wind. She packed her kit, paused, and looked up at the sky dome. A sliver of light pierced the upper atmosphere. A reminder that even in artificial war, there were still exits. She left without fanfare. Above, the Council's risk assessment AI generated a new probability chart. Under Human Ballistic Combatant, it added 1 note. Avoid. The Council didn't understand the sniper's war. They thought in terms of formations, charges, luminous shields, and pulse beams that announced themselves with operatic sound. They thought conflict was loud. Mira Hart knew better. War wasn't noise, it was math whispered through silence. A long equation of distance, pressure, angle, and timing where emotion had no value. She had learned long ago that the closer you are to stillness, the clearer everything becomes. She was beneath a crumbling arch now, body prone, gear silent, eyes narrowed behind the matte optics of sable. Her hands were steady. Her breath barely registered in the dust that danced before her muzzle. She wasn't calm. She wasn't tense. She simply was. The battlefield stretched out before her like a stage no one knew was already rigged. Environmental hazards rotated. Fractal terrain bent light in artificial patterns. Council drones buzzed in silent arcs above, feeding the spectacle to millions across the Accord. And somewhere within that expanse, Tharknox moved. Mira had already mapped him, though the scoreboard insisted he was untrackable. From a spectator's view, Tharknox was nothing but a shimmer, an arrogant flicker teleporting through micro-dimensions. The crowd roared every time he vanished and reappeared. Every step was applause. He glowed with confidence. Or at least, he had. That was 10 minutes ago. Now, his phase intervals were tightening. Mira noted the rhythm. His appearances grew more hurried, his pacing less theatrical. He was searching, and he wasn't finding her. Because she was inside his blind spot, not of vision, but of thought. He didn't believe someone like her could be still for so long. That was his mistake. She adjusted the cheek weld on her rifle by a fraction of a centimeter. Target acquisition wasn't the issue. She could have taken a dozen shots already. Torso, shoulder, even a limb. But she wasn't here to send a message. She was here to make a point. The Council thought snipers were relics. They mistook silence for submission. She would give them the correction they never saw coming. The kill zone ahead shimmered slightly. A crackle in phase residue. His distortion wave lingered longer this time. A small error. But errors added up. 1,000 meters. Wind speed. Irrelevant. Controlled airflow in this quadrant. Still, she accounted for heat mirage, structural bloom from the ruins below, and a magnetic interference caused by the ion core reactor pulsing beneath the arena's floor. The bullet would travel in a parabolic curve. Gravity in this dome was 0.86 Earth standard. She calculated drop compensation in her head. She tracked 3 frames ahead of his trajectory. Not where he was, not even where he'd go, but where his pattern broke before his mind realized it. He blinked again, and Mira saw it. The micro-hesitation before each rephase. He was second-guessing, scanning terrain too quickly. And just once, only once, he returned to a prior location, thinking it safe. Myra's gloved finger slipped inside the trigger guard. Heartbeat. Inhale. She let it out slowly, counting down, not to calm herself, but to sink. 3, 2, 1. Fire. There was no dramatic report. Just a soft punch of air, a mechanical snap as Sable sang her single note. The round, a custom-forged sabot with depleted uranium core and ceramic casing, left the barrel at Mach 5.3, sliced through humidity, passed a shifting light beam, and entered Tharknox's secondary ocular cortex precisely 0.67 seconds after the start of his next phase jump. He rematerialized already dead. One moment, the crowd was cheering. The next, their champion landed on the ridge, lifeless. He crumpled in silence. The council didn't react right away. There was a pause, a collective computational lag, as if reality itself had glitched. The scoreboards didn't update. The announcers hesitated. Mira didn't wait. She was already packing. Sable folded into its lock case, remagnetized and sealed with a sound like a final breath. She secured it, rolled from her perch, and slid down the ruins with practiced grace. She moved like rain. Quiet, measured, purposeful. Above, confusion bloomed like a virus. What happened? Asked one commentator. I believe the human has eliminated Tharknox, another said, barely able to finish the sentence. No energy weapon, a third gasped. No lock-on system. Just a bullet. A bullet, Lex Sloan confirmed from the council's chamber, sipping something that wasn't technically tea but served a similar purpose. Through 12 layers of enhanced fractal shielding and a live dimension jump. A statistical impossibility, the Zerthian delegate stammered. Lex didn't argue. He just smiled. Mira reached the extraction point as alarms finally kicked in. Not danger alarms. Protocol alerts. The council hadn't programmed a proper exit sequence for the human. They hadn't expected her to leave standing. A ship waited, a low-profile Earth vessel painted black, unarmed, except for its engines and the defiant red-white-blue insignia stenciled under the cockpit glass. Mira boarded without ceremony. She passed a young ensign on the way to the bridge. He blinked at her. Did you win? She gave him a look like gravity, certain, immutable, and not in need of acknowledgement. I did what I came for, she said. As she settled into the cabin, the comms lit up. Messages were pouring in, requests for interviews, invitations to negotiations, accusations of sabotage. Mira ignored them all. She leaned back, cracked her neck, and closed her eyes. Above the dome, panic bloomed in political waves. Species that once scoffed at Earth's outdated weapons now debated whether every human sniper was just as deadly. Some believed she was enhanced. Others claimed she'd used dark tech. The most rational ones feared the truth, that she had simply known how to wait, breathe, and calculate. Inside the data servers of the Galactic Accord, a red flag was added to Earth's military entry. Caution: human projectile-class soldiers capable of non-psionic lethal precision beyond standard predictive metrics. Mira never saw it. She didn't need to. The damage was done. The Council reconvened in a state of panic best described as multi-species bureaucratic seizure. Diplomats with gills hyperventilated into nutrient water. Others paced on multiple legs, molted stress skin, or emitted pheromonal distress clouds that made the chamber smell like burnt citrus and algae panic. All screens replayed the same silent footage, a single human lying flat in fabricated foliage. Then the instant a round exited her rifle and entered Tharknox's brainstem before physics had quite finished deciding where his body was. Nobody spoke for 12 minutes. Eventually, someone did. This changes the balance, rasped Ambassador Throlg, his translucent skull throbbing faintly. One bullet. No fanfare. No psychic enhancement. Just Newtonian cruelty. Commander Lex Sloan did not reply. He sat with folded arms, the only biped not sweating, quivering, or excreting bioluminescence in the room. His face betrayed nothing. His teacup steamed quietly. A jelly-like delegate from the outer rim trembled on his hover disk. She was not even ranked. Not even registered in the Multi-Galactic Combatives Registry. That is the ranking, Lex said calmly. You don't register snipers. You deploy them. The translator struggled to render his tone. The Council struggled more to interpret it. She anticipated a phase jump, mumbled a Murix tactician, her throat frills pulsing a low blue. Nobody does that. Not reliably. Not unassisted. Lex shrugged. She's done it before. The silence thickened. A dozen voices began competing over proposed doctrines, resolutions, and protective treaties. New rules were hastily drafted: ban kinetic weapons, require sniper registration, limit projectile velocity in regulated conflict zones. It all sounded reasonable, even diplomatic. Lex interrupted them again. "What's the point?" The council froze. "The point of what?" "Of pretending this was a malfunction," Lex said. "She followed your rules. She used your terrain. She shot within her lane. You mocked Earth's tools for being simple. So we sent you simplicity, wrapped in patience." He stood, let his silence hang before he finished. "And she took your god champion down with one bullet." The record reflects that no one replied. Meanwhile, Mira Hart slept. Not metaphorically, she was actually asleep in the troop bay of the Earth shuttle en route to the Soul Gate. Her rifle, disassembled and cleaned, lay zipped in a bag by her boot. A half-eaten ration bar rested on her chest, crumbs scattered like fallen shrapnel. Jenkins, a corporal with a questionable mustache and too many opinions about Starship Coffee, sat across from her. He whispered to the lieutenant next to him, "She really just, waited in a bush and killed a demigod?" "Pretty much." And the council lost their minds. Lost their structure charts, strategic alignment protocols, and a dimension-stable champion. All in one trigger pull. Jenkins blinked. "Remind me to never piss off a sniper." "You'll forget," Mira muttered from under her cap, eyes still closed. "But the crater won't." They both shut up. 2 hours later, she was debriefed in a dark glass room, Earthside. A tired officer with too many pins on his collar leaned forward and asked, "What were you thinking when you pulled the trigger?" Mira stared. Then, "That he gave me the shot." He blinked. "That's it. That's all it takes." Later, they asked her to lead a training seminar. She declined. They asked if she wanted her own team. She declined that too. "Snipers don't need squads," she said. "They need distance." She returned to her old outpost near the Martian cliffs. Quiet. Windy. Perfect. Her quarters were sparse. Her gear lived in locked cases. Her days returned to drills, meditation, and watching clouds form over red dust. She spoke little. But the galaxy talked about her enough for 10 lives. In the weeks following the event, 3 minor civilizations revised their entire defense strategies to account for low-tech kinetic threats. A large-scale peace negotiation was suddenly approved by species that had previously refused to even share oxygen. One weapons manufacturer, human, of course, saw its stock price triple. Myra's name was scrubbed from public council logs. Not redacted, scrubbed. Not out of shame, but fear. To name her was to acknowledge that something like her existed. And worse, that there were more. For there were more. Mira was not the best. She would say so herself. She was average among the people who trained in what she knew. There were snipers with faster reflexes, better instincts, deeper patience. One of them had once waited 4 days in sub-zero conditions just to shoot through a window the target hadn't built yet. The difference was that Mira had been seen. That was enough. On a distant moon, a young Varan military cadet held a replica of a Terran rifle in his clawed hands and asked his instructor, "Can it really kill gods?" The instructor, a veteran of 17 wars, replied without irony, "No. It just kills anything stupid enough to stand still when the human breathes in." In a subterranean think tank, council strategists recalculated the risk matrix of all future engagements. The model changed from psionic dominance to line-of-sight avoidance. A single rule emerged: if a human says nothing, get out of range. Back at her outpost, Mira watched the sunset through a broken visor she'd tacked over the window. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She cleaned her rifle, drank stale coffee, and listened to the Martian wind whistle like it was trying to warn the galaxy. It was too late for that. Much too late.